proactive, because if it's only 15% actively looking for it and the ZEV mandate is 22, you've got to get another 7% of people to buy into it.
Hello and welcome to the Armchair Show. I'm your moderator, Tanisha, and I'm so thrilled to have you guys here with us today. So we've got a great group of people here today. And to start off, why don't we go around the table one by one, just say who we are, where we're from, and what we do.
Yeah, good afternoon. Neil Smith, owner, founder of Motivate Automotive Consultancy, working with dealers, both independent and franchise, and suppliers to the industry.
Good. Hi, everyone. I'm Kerry Thompson, founder of Aquino Limited. We're a business transformation agency working in automotive with both OEM and dealer side, but also out of automotive as well. So we have both auto and non-auto experience.
Lovely. Paul Rumsby, Kia Franchise Director for the Ken Brown Motor Group. We have 2 dealerships, one in Harlow, one in Stevenage, and we look after sales, after sales, your traditional dealership environment. So.
And hello, my name's Adam Fajani. I'm the Group Marketing Manager for the Holden Group, and we have 5 dealership brands: Volvo, Kia, Renault, Dacia, Renault. So I say Renault? I've already said Renault. I'll get there eventually. Sorry,
it's fine. We like Renault. We'll say it twice. Twice for good measure.
Getting there twice.
Extra brand awareness.
Honda. We have 7 sites in total. So we have 3 Volvo sites, and I'm the marketing manager for all of them.
Perfect. A very nice collective group of different roles here today. So to kick us off, obviously before we started filming today, we've had a little bit of a look at the EV market this morning. We've had a look at our EV report, which we'll share at the end of this episode for everybody that is listening. But can one of you guys give us, I guess, just a quick overview for what's happening at EVs? How would you sum up the EV market today and where we're at?
It's always perceived lately that it's a bit of a negative, and it really shouldn't be. That EV is the way forward. I think if you was to look at the stats for anyone that drives an EV vehicle or currently owns it, it's about 97% that they would retain EV moving forward and not go back to your combustion engine. But we get, and we mentioned this earlier, we get a lot of negative press. And I think what happens is that transpires down to a consumer. It really starts, putting roadblocks in front of us. And there are certain challenges we have to overcome when sitting in front of customers. But ultimately, it's the way forward, and that they, all the manufacturers now makes a bad car, a bad EV product. So no, I think it's definitely the way forward. But
I think you're right in terms of the barriers that we have to overcome in terms of the wider audiences. People that think they're worried about they've got range anxiety, or whether it's they don't want to go out into an automatic car. I think people remember automatic cars from the 80s. I know my mum and dad do. They're like, it's got to be manual and it's got to be petrol. Those are the type of people you see don't actually go out of the town or anything like that. They don't travel too fast. So it's the type of people we need to talk about and sort of demystify a lot of the misconceptions there are around EVs.
Yeah.
As well. So there's a lot of education from my point of view that we need to get out there to our customers around region that we're in. And so we're obviously based in Norfolk and Norwich and things like that. So it's getting out to those communities and talking to them about what the issues they perceive are and how we're going to combat them.
I think you're right. Education's a real key part, isn't it? So when it comes to, from a consumer perspective, walking into a dealership and maybe starting the exploration into EV world, you're going to have 100 questions. So therefore, it comes down to, this is where the dealership, regardless of the brand, the size of the dealership, the education that the team and the staff have about EVs and how they portray and how they give that education across to the customer is really, really important. Certainly from my side, when I mention to family or friends that you work in automotive, there's often a barrage of questions that come, or statements or stories. But anecdotally, and it is anecdotally, lots of these stories that I hear of people who have gone into a dealership, into a brand, with questions, and they can't get the answers that they need, or they get conflicting answers.
Yeah, and one thing is that we're trying to be good at, and the one thing with the brand Kia, they're so far ahead of the curve with EV, they really are. They had a terminology right at the start of the year that we have to become EV evangelists,
Yes.
in essence, and really promote that. So there's some things that we've done that have really worked. We do workshops where we invite people in just to come and actually experience the EV product and ask all those relevant questions. We're not trying to sell a customer a car. We purely are just trying to be educational,
Yes.
informative, trying to help people understand how it can fit into their sort of walk of life. And secondly, and this does make a big difference, is when we're getting customers coming to our sales department, we try and get all our courtesy cars to be EV. And so what we're doing, we're trying to encourage someone to come in and actually give them the confidence to say, oh, can you give us some feedback? So we're going to give you the chance to drive an EV for the first time. We're not expecting you to come back and say you want to buy it. All we want is your feedback that we can pass back to our own staff and manufacturers, but it's helping them take that first step and actually understand how that works. And then the advisors will take the customer out, show them the controls, and ensure that, it's an exciting opportunity for a customer to come in and actually drive that car for the first time. And not be hell-bent on us trying to sell the customer the car rather than actually just experience it. And I think the minute they've had that drive, and we play a bit of a game, we watch the miles. So we look at how the mileage or range on the car, and we try and encourage them to drive it further. But 9 times out of 10, they're just running kids to school or doing the shopping. And sometimes you'll get a car back and it's done over 100 miles in a day. And it's them customers that you can suddenly see, wow, they really enjoyed it, and that's the customers that we try and work alongside with as well. So
and look, from my perspective, independent sector is where I operate mainly, and as well as the challenges you've spoken of, I think there's more challenges within independent EV sales at the moment. The residual value hit those vehicles took 18 months, 2 years ago. That hit a lot of those guys hard and they got burned at that time. So getting that confidence back in the product, understanding how to sell that product. I've got one dealer, 300 car site, very good, understands EVs, knows how to buy used EVs, can educate the consumer, does really well out of them. Others are just not in that place. They're not engaging, and they'd rather at this point back away a little bit because the impact, and there's certain makes and models. Some will get burned on certain makes and models. Others, they'll know how to buy a Tesla, they'll know how to sell a Tesla, they know what the market value for a Tesla is, and they'll get some good results out of it.
And it's funny, and we have to look at the profit opportunity, especially on the used car side, that some dealers are taking those cars in part exchange and not necessarily going and buying them. And then what happens, we're not creating our own opportunity, where we should be really looking at the product in its entirety and looking at what the benefits are and what that car is really worth. What we struggle with is we don't want to get caught with the car. We don't want to write the car back. We don't want it sitting on the books for too long. So we have this race to the bottom. We're trying to put it on the Auto Trader platform, for example, on page 1, and we try and make it as cheap as possible. So we turn the metal quickly. But as a consequence, the rest of the dealers with the same makes, the same models, and then going, well, I'm £2,000 more expensive. So now I'm going to bring my car down. And it's that vicious circle that you get caught up in.
It is. And I think there's this point at the moment where you've got used EV now, a lot of them are at parity with used ICE.
Very much.
Okay. So there is the potential now for used car dealers to start to make some inroads and gains, but it is that fear factor of getting stuck with that vehicle.
And that procurement, isn't it? Is actually taking a bit of a leap of faith and thinking that car genuinely is worth that money, and I'm going to buy that. And I think you're spot on. You've got dealers that are great, and they know what the sweet spots are for those particular vehicles, and take the opportunity. And with that, there is some good returns, and the dealers that don't, and that makes that bit.
And going back to that education piece, there's way more to do on that education around those used EVs as well. The questions around battery health. How does that impact?
That was one of the things I was putting up there, is when you get to that used car market, are people aware that the battery life is just as good on that used car as
well,
a
again,
car?
I think speaking to what you said a minute ago around the sort of general press coverage that we're seeing at the moment. There's a lot of fear being instilled in consumers at the moment. That press has turned 180 degrees in the last 2 years. I was hosting a panel at British Motor Show, which was EV panel, had general public there. Person puts his hand up saying, well, my EV is going to explode. It's going to catch fire. I've read all the stories. Well, okay.
You're sitting on a combustion engine.
Yeah. So 20 years ago, Zafira has had a bit of an issue around that. And I think this fear factor now, not only is it going to impact on you, because you're going to have to do that education piece and nullify those sort of news stories that we're seeing in the general press at the moment, but it filters down into used as well, because for the used side, there is also an education piece within used about the maintenance of that vehicle, and warranties on vehicles and warranties on the batteries. We're not in the new car space where the OEM can put that warranty on it and guarantee it. We're in a space where all of a sudden we're retailing 3 or 4 year old EVs. Some of them will have seen some detriment to the battery range over that period. So instead of 270, it might be 230. So it's how do we get that message across?
And it is that education. So like the Teslas, where they're used a lot for company car drivers, they're fast charged a lot. That restricts the battery life. And we've invested in a lot of, because we do sell non-franchise, we've invested a lot of tools that give us a battery life condition. So we're able to print off and show that person. But again, the whole purpose of the workshops, regardless if it's a no use, is just to invite people in to try and take away the concerns. And again, there's probably only 5 or 6 that everybody seems to focus on, whether that be the anxiety, the infrastructure, how much it's going to cost me at home. And then you have the flip side where people are saying, well, my electricity bill is going to keep going up, and how much does that cost me at home? And when you sit them down and work out actually that how much cheaper it is to run an EV overall versus a combustion engine, regardless of sometimes some of the higher mileage drivers, is and you see it when especially when you see in the sales guys in front of the customer, and they're like, "Oh God!" And it's that breakthrough, and you suddenly see it, and the amount of people that you do see and they share it with us, they've done that, and then they become advocates of it for you. So you're always encouraging to mention it to the neighbour or the family friend, and actually I wasn't so sure. I've gone somewhere where they've actually given me that education, and as a result, I've took that leap, and actually was I worried about in the end.
Yeah, and I think that's become far more of a consultative sales approach, and it's a longer burn. And something in the used car sector is, traditionally, let's put this delicately, I suppose, but sales execs in the used car sector usually deal with fresh inquiries really well, but actually then looking at that retention piece and that follow-up piece, that's not something that sector's renowned for, okay? So when you start to have to get involved in consultative selling, educate the customer, probably accept they're not going to buy that EV the first visit because they need to go away and digest and process, and then you've got to have that process of follow-up and nurturing. And it might be 3 months, it might be 6 months down the road that the customer's ready to consider making that leap into an EV. And I think that's where, we're very used in the used car sector to instant sale. Customer comes in, we want them driving away that day.
And it's tough, right? Because we've talked about earlier, the ZEV mandate. So there's the pressure to hit the number. Of course, from a dealership perspective, with the sales execs on the floor, there's a pressure for them to achieve their number. And it's achieving their number now, right? Because we're not going to say, yes, we need to think about the number next month or in the next quarter, but we also need to achieve our number now. And this is where a dealership that I was working with, a dealer group that I was invited in to go and do some work with, they were struggling with their EV sales, and they wanted to do a bit of a discovery exercise to work out why. And again, like Neil and I, some of the work that we've done together, often the thought is there a system we need? Is there a focus on, is there something else that we need to buy in order to help to sell more EVs? Actually, the result of the discovery piece that I did with them was it was actually around from the people perspective. So actually it was the sales execs on the ground. As you say, it was the pressure of having to sell now was one part of it, but also they weren't advocates. So they needed the education and they needed to become advocates, because when someone was walking through the door with a whole series of questions about EV, it just become too much of a hard sell. So therefore it was almost easier to default back to let's just go to the 1.6 petrol. Boom, get the sale and get it over the line.
And it's something that Kia have worked with all the network in this respect, we're constantly having to show and demonstrate how we are working with the staff in the dealerships to make sure they are completely accustomed to EVs, charging. They do so much training on their academy, which is amazing. And again, what we're trying to do with our staff as well is we'll give them an EV to go and drive home, and we'll make sure it's got no range, so literally 10 miles. So they've then got to go and be the customer and go and find a charging station and do what the customer does, and so they can then have that real experience to suddenly pass it on when the customer in front of them going, look, I suffer with this is my concern. Actually, I had the same concern, and it is that continual education, not for us to educate the customer, to go through the advisors so they are solely on board with it. I think that's half our problem. You know, we've allowed in time, and you said about the used car, typical used car salesman.
Yep.
You know, I come from a background a long time ago. It was deal and deliver on the same day.
Yeah,
you actually try and get rid of the car. That isn't the case, and that salesman sometimes would actually lose the customer on purpose because they know that time to convince the customer to buy
too long.
is a lot longer as opposed to just coming in for the third Picanto in a row, and it's a nice easy sale because they've already got one. They know how it works. It's a very different mindset.
Yeah.
And again, we've had to come a lot further back and having some empathy with our sales teams and actually changing how they're remunerated to make sure that they engage in EV sales.
How many people are coming in as a percentage of the total opportunities you've got? How many are coming in and wanting to talk about EVs now?
It's very minimal. I'd say it's probably under 15%.
Okay.
We have the Kia have a scorecard metric, and you know, we're constantly looking at how we can perform. And our Stevenage branch is third in EV sales in the UK, so we're real up there with that, which is great. And I can't commend the team enough for the time they take with the customers. And the typical sales process is, you know, qualification. We'll go through what the customer wants, and we go out with an offer sheet on that particular car. What we also do, we'll go out with an offer sheet on the equivalent EV. Okay. So we're constantly pushing that boundary. Now that's tough in itself because the salesman has the resistance. So I don't want to. They know what they want. Why am I going to try and sell them something different? And again, it's that culture of trying to get people to genuinely believe that we're doing the customer an injustice if we can show them a way of actually future proofing themselves and getting into an EV. You know, it's never going to be easier. It's always going to get harder. But we need to be better now. What we do.
Yeah, and clearly you've got to be proactive because if it's only 15% actively looking for it and the ZEV mandate is 22, you've got to get another 7% of people to buy into it.
So a question for all of you really in terms of, because I'm new to the industry, 6 months in. So is the ZEV mandate, like a lot of things these days, especially social media, pushing a market too early towards electric, fully electric vehicles? Whereas it's not allowing the nuance to guide people from petrol through to hybrid and then into EV, which would be probably more of a natural.
Look, I think there's the lack of any real incentive out there for consumers to start to buy into EV is not helping. Okay, so if we know what ZEV mandate looks like over the next 5 years, and it's increasing annually, you know, so how do we as an industry get those customers engaged to the point, as we just noted, only 15% of people at the moment are actively coming in asking about EV.
The customers don't understand. No. As I said before I came in to the industry, as I said, no one was in the room. When we were saying before, I didn't understand the ZEV mandate. I had no idea it existed. All I saw was the government pushing it back to 2035. And that's what the majority of Joe public will be left.
And there's not enough from the government. I mean, back in the day we had scrappage.
Yep.
That's what we need. We need something to sort of really kickstart. And for us as the dealer networks, they were some of our best years, you know, when that was about. Not because, you know, it was just the inquiries, you know, suddenly increased. We were, you know, doing very well with able to then help the customer. And the customers was getting something for nothing. You had a car that true trade value was £300-400, and they're getting £2,000.
Yeah.
And that was generating people to walk in off the street and say, actually, I will consider it now, because I've got a reason, a stimulus that has been created for us.
You know what's fascinating? So I was at an EV summit a few months ago. I was invited to an EV summit in Oxford. It's obviously a very green city, very known for its green credentials. And what was fascinating during this couple of day conference was it was talking about exactly this, the blockers from the ZEV mandate perspective and 2035, 2030, in terms of what was going to happen there as well. And what was fascinating, so you've got one of the barriers is the customer education. So we've talked about that. Another barrier is the nature of the dealership in terms of having to hit numbers today. The education, again, of the sales execs who can then educate the consumers. So all of that was all a given, was understood. But for me, there's a couple of nuggets that I learned from that session. And it's from the infrastructure perspective, what you've got now is you've got some really great businesses doing really great collaboration in order to try and step up and stand up really great infrastructure. So we've seen, haven't we? So lots of new technologies around on-street charging and all this kind of stuff. But then what some of those speakers were talking about was in the difficulties when it comes to, for example, getting through council planning. So you've got the intention, you've got sometimes the funding because there's investors. And then to actually get through the bureaucracy, of, for example, of council planning means then that's another reason why even in cities like Oxford, perhaps, is that there are maybe not enough chargers, some people might say, when it comes to wanting to charge their vehicle. Then you had the idea of payment. So again, one of the speakers was talking about, and they were from a payment business. So the idea that you found your charger now. So you bought your car, you bought your EV, step one. You found your charger, step two, amazing. You've plugged in, you're good to go. You go to pay, and there's an issue with your contactless payment, or you need to download an app, you need to set up your app. And all of those barriers. So then you've owned your car now. So you've almost you've contributed to the ZEV mandate. Tick. You've bought your car, but we need to keep those people as evangelists, don't we?
100%.
Otherwise, it's like we all talk about the bad experiences that we have, don't we? Kind of as human beings, we love sharing the bad stuff, right? A bit like me and my broken finger. But we don't say the good stuff. So actually, we need to ensure that it's post ownership as well, that the barriers continue to be knocked down when it comes to that ownership.
That ease of access piece is, I get frustrated when I go and park somewhere and have to download yet another parking app to be able to pay.
Yes.
And that's just a minor little. So if I was going around the country and having to work out what app I needed to charge, and I'm sure it's a lot simpler than it used to be. However, it's all of those little barriers, and those are the concerns, I suppose, of the consumer, especially those consumers that are of a certain age that don't even do online banking or something. It's suddenly you're into this world of having to manage everything through an app. It's not as easy as going and putting
it's important we
pump into there.
Sorry,
that's
it's
right.
important we as dealers on the shop floor experience it as well.
Yes.
From my point of view, in terms of marketing, so I've got an EV. I drove my EV here.
Very good.
I asked if there was a charging point here, making sure we do it, but I still got here at 10:02, and at 15:15 I was still trying to register for the app.
All right. Yeah, point taken.
Yeah, so I can understand. So I understand the frustrations, but equally, I took EV9 from Ipswich to North Wales. So there's actually a YouTube video of me doing ZapMap, planning my journey, how we're going to get there. Still making sure that we were able to get to the different points around.
And there is an element of pre-planning, isn't there? I think that's absolutely. We've become heavily. Our world is all about convenience, whether that be takeaways or these companies that deliver things for us, and the DPD and all of those Amazons. We've taken for granted. We run into a petrol garage, we fill up and we're on our way. And if we just change our mindset slightly, and we pre-plan the journey. So I drove an EV here, and I just made sure that I've got plenty of charge to make sure I get forward and back. And I think EV will become a lot easier when we have batteries that are not temperature dependent, that have over 500 mile range, and that's coming. That just is in time. That there's no doubt with that. And I think that will give customers or consumers a lot more confidence. But like you said, sometimes you have got to pre-plan, and you have got to take a bit of time just to make sure that everything's going okay, and it's got to be real life. I drive an EV9 as well, a wonderful bit of kit. But
fantastic car.
I drove from where we are now north, and there's a lot more hills, and all of a sudden my 80-mile journey isn't 80 miles that I've used. It's more, and so you have to factor that in.
The best sound bites, and I need to credit the person who gave me the sound bites. It's not mine. Randall Smith, who will absolutely be tuned into this podcast, said it's around you don't stop to charge, you charge when you stop.
Yep.
And it's the mindset difference, not that, oh my God, I've got to stop to charge now. No, I've been driving for a while. I need to stop anyway. So whilst I stop, I'm going to charge. Go and use facilities, grab a coffee, and that's when you're doing this top.
So I took the kids to Warwick, parked up, charge, put it on charge, went out and played. Great. We had the dog, so they wouldn't allow us in Warwick Castle. But we went out and played, went around the park, had lunch, things like that. By the time we got back to the car, it was nicely charged for us to go on to our next stop, which we had to stop anyway. So it's just making sure you've got that in your journey. Absolutely right.
And I think now's probably a good point to talk through the report that we were talking about before we started recording. So we had a little look at the Leebot report before coming in, and the data shown us clearly that there's a growing interest in EVs, which is great. And especially amongst the younger audience, they seem to be kind of more inclined to be interested in EVs than perhaps some of the older generation that are very familiar and used to petrol and diesel cars and are perhaps a little bit more inclined to be stuck in their way. But customers are still concerned about the same things as to when I first ran a report 7-8 years ago. They're still concerned about sustainability, the cost of maintaining an EV, and most importantly, that range anxiety. That hasn't changed. So when I ran a report 7 years ago, those concerns are still very much the same as the report that we looked through this morning. Firstly, does that report and that data that we looked at this morning, is that still what you see, especially from the dealer world, I guess more aimed at you guys, and then from a consultancy basis? Does that still match?
I think from a range, yes. So is the first initial answer. From a range perspective, you get that a lot from, especially probably an older generation, our generation and beyond. Even though they, for example, are both mine and my partner's parents, adamant petrol drivers, manual must be. And you ask them why, because they barely leave the town. And it's, I might go somewhere else. I might go here. I might go there. And in essence, they'd probably be a perfect sort of candidate for an EV vehicle in terms of that. There's always other options as well. If you're doing longer distance, hire a car, it still works out cheaper in terms of like overall cost. So if that's what they want to do.
So how do we help a customer like that? What would it take, do you think, for a customer like that for them to consider EVs?
I think it's trying the car. And I think it's about getting them into those vehicles and showing them how easy it is. That initial barrier, I don't know if you've seen that or in terms of agree, but if you can get them in that. Also, talking about having the charger at home is always a really handy thing as well. With people travelling to work and back. Okay, what's the range? How far do you travel to work and back? Here's your. This is the cost in terms of the if you're.
Comparisons.
Comparisons are really handy.
Combustion engine.
But I think and it's really tough from a dealer side, this one, but I think one of the answers is about the extended test drives and the extended ownership. I mean, because even for someone like myself who, I love cars, I'm in this industry. We were talking earlier, Adam, you said you're kind of not maybe a car man, but I love cars. So I'm in this industry because for the metal. I really do like my cars. I've just moved house centered around the side of the garage. And it's got quite a nice house attached to it. So that's just giving an insight into my world, genuinely.
Priorities that you come up with, yeah.
Genuinely,
Absolutely.
my priorities are cars and garage space, house second. And so for that reason, even someone who is so into cars, and I've researched EVs, for me, the idea of switching over was really quite tough until one of my cars was a bit poorly. So my commuter car was a bit poorly a little while ago. I was working with an OEM at the time. They saw it as a fantastic opportunity to try and sell me a car. So whilst my poorly car was in the garage for a very expensive repair for about 10 days, they loaned me an EV for an extended test drive from their fleet. And to actually live and breathe with an EV, for someone I admit was slightly sceptical, not quite like your parents, Adam, but slightly sceptical, because I do like everything about my usual cars. To live and breathe it for 10 days was incredible. And actually all of the barriers that I'd perhaps built up myself around, I'm to plug it in when it's raining and how do you manage all these sorts of things, is it was great. Now at the end of it, now I got my poorly car back, and
Some disappointment.
and yeah, but the performance of the car, everything, every box was ticked. It was incredible.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is we call it bums on seats, sell cars. You know, that's the strategy we've always had, and it is getting people to drive the car because the instant power output, you know,
Yes.
the drive, the technology. You know, sometimes we've had customers come back and start looking at the sales, go through the sales process, because they've had the courtesy car as an EV. They've got back in their own car and they're like,
oh,
Put
Yeah.
the foot down. It's gone nowhere.
yeah,
and that's the point, is you wouldn't go into a DFS and not sit on the sofa. And I think we just need to encourage those extended test drives. And unfortunately, there is a cost involved.
there is, yeah.
And we can't pass those costs on to anybody other than absorb them ourselves. If we don't start having those mindsets and start operating in that way, it makes the job so much more difficult. That's why we try and encourage the workshops and those elements of just driving the car. And again, very, very rarely someone will come out and actually dislike it.
It's also making it as easy as possible, like for your parents, Adam. It's about, I think, if they were genuinely sat in front of the sales exec, and for the sales exec to fully understand their objections first of all and their concerns, and to take the time to fully address them is important. But it's also, again, that idea of removing the barriers, isn't it? So again, just as a quick anecdote, that so my dad, probably like your parents as well, is ice car man sort of through and through, and only ever been a Ford man as well. So he's never driven any of the vehicle. Very, very brand loyal. And so he actually thought about, for the same reasons you said, stays fairly local. So actually thought, I'm going to be one of the 15%. I'm going to go and inquire about EVs. But one of his biggest concerns was charging points at home. And again, one of the barriers to him was, how do I charge at home? And what he left the dealership with was a list of 5 local Sparkies, 5 local electricians to phone up. So he phoned all 5. He'd done his homework, and all 5 came round and gave him 5 different answers and 5 different prices. And he walked back into the dealership and said, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I've had 5 different prices and 5 different answers. And the answer he got from the dealership was a big old shrug. I don't know what you want me to do.
I think from a dealership perspective, in terms of the home charging element to it, we don't want to provide people with bad advice.
Absolutely.
And because we have to outside contract that, it then ends up falling back on the dealerships.
We managed to, last year, on one of the first dealers I know of, and Kia were admitted this, we negated all our margin, and we then went into a partnership with a EV charging company and Mr. Charger, Zavadis, and we set up the plan that when you bought the EV, we did the whole installation, a standard install. We're not running 400 metres of RFA.
Absolutely.
But a standard installation, they could access it from just pictures that we got the customer to send into Mr. Charger, and we literally did the whole process from start to finish. So we ordered the car. As the car became a built vehicle, this is going back, I know they're off the shelf now, so it's a bit different. But as the car was physically tangible, we then instruct the unit to be sent to the customer's house. And there's a degree of risk from our point of view, naturally. But again, we're trying to take as much ownership and the stress.
Make it as easy
because
as
that's really what it is. The customer is sitting there, getting nervous, getting anxious, and sitting there thinking, I've got to arrange everything. Just let us do it. And you've got to take control of that.
We've spoken a lot about getting people in, educating them in the store, giving them the opportunity for extended test drive or to give them a courtesy car. What I see in the independent space is there is not enough being done on the websites. So you go to a search results page and they've got 20 EVs. They're still reporting on the mileage on the vehicle, but they're not putting front and centre on the search results page the range.
Yep.
Clearly, that's one of the key points for anybody to make a decision on an EV. And a lot of the websites are still sort of geared towards that old ICE cap detail that's coming through to populate. And you have to go into the vehicle details page, scroll down to technical data, search around, and there's so much information around kilowatt, this, that, and the other, which
no one understands.
Nobody understands. Really, all you want to be doing is looking on that search results page, choose an EV, saying, right, that Polestar, 420 mile range, brilliant, I'll look at that. And I think there's a massive education piece there because we're talking top of funnel activity there. And at the moment, if only 15% of people are coming in, now clearly the manufacturers are doing a better job of that. Independent space, I would anticipate less than 15% are going in asking about EVs.
Which is exactly, I'm actually in the middle of building a new website as we speak.
Yeah.
So please don't take the current into account.
It was nothing to do with you.
Yeah, it was well before my time. But yeah, so this was show this to the camera.
Yeah.
This is something I wrote when I first started.
Very good.
At the thing. So it's just literally all the content that I think I would want as a customer.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to do it as fresh as I could when I came into the industry. So I was trying to think, okay, what do I want to know? For example, things like FEV, MEV.
Yeah.
We tend to think of customers that they know everything about a car, that they know what they want and how they want it. For me, I don't know if I'm atypical in terms of a person, Joe Public, but when I was looking at a car, I was like, okay, then what's going to fit all the stuff in the boot for my family?
Yeah.
When we go on holiday, or when we go away, or when we're just going down to a park for a day out, whatever it is. So, and I want to know what the options are in terms of family vehicles, in terms of those things with boot space, and I want someone to give me those options.
Yes.
I don't know what make. I'm not make loyal. I'm not. So when I was looking at the search options, for me, I was like, okay, I just want a family vehicle with a big boot. So how do I search for that?
Yeah.
I don't
what am I
know.
looking at?
Yeah, I don't know what the models are.
Mm-hmm.
Or I didn't know. I know all the models for our brands, I must state, before my boss is watching this. But I didn't know what the models were. So I was stuck. So from my point of view, I'm sort of building a website from my non-knowledge point of view, if that makes sense. So it starts at an easier place for customers. And then it has the content in it that you require in order to make that purchase.
Yeah, and I think, look, just very quickly on that point, if we want to go and do a budget search on a website, it's very easy to.
Yeah.
Why is it not a range search?
Yep. And we don't
from an independent sector.
Cost us too much either, especially on those platforms. And something we're noticing again quite lately is consumers are still a little bit nervous, and because residual values are tough on EV, what happens is it naturally makes your PCP agreements, the payments look expensive. So there is definitely a bigger transition where people are just straight leasing vehicles because they're worried about the monthly instalment and not sitting there worrying in 3 years' time, am I going to have equity? Am I going to have no equity? And again, what we touched on earlier, which can sometimes hinder us because we are guilty of driving the prices down on EV just because of the way the market is. We're doing the customers that already have EVs an injustice because we know that actually that car, when it comes in 3, it's worth more than what we're probably going to offer you for it, but we can't change what I've got to pay for that car. And sometimes that's a bit of a tough spot when the customer's coming back saying, well, I put £10,000 down deposit, I've had the car 3 years, and I've got £2,000 equity. And that's a difficult conversation for any advisor to have. And then suddenly just gives the consumer a bit of a...
I think we were talking off air earlier about deal stack, and I think there's an element of that needs to come into that sort of online piece, really, saying, well, okay, in terms of cost of ownership, cost of running this vehicle, PCP may be £30, £40 a month more, but actually you're going to be saving yourself £100 a month in fuel costs. It's the overall package, and we always used to do this. It was the cost of change, right?
Yeah, CTC.
CTC, straightforward, part X value, retail price of the vehicle. We'd have customers coming in saying, well, I can go down the road and buy that car for £500 less. What have they offered you part exchange? £1,000 less. Yep. There you go. It's better to buy it from us, isn't it? And we're now moving into that EV space, and a lot of that now, the justification for selling a customer an EV is not just the sustainability bit, but it's going to cost them less, of course.
It's about providing a relevant journey, isn't it? Like the report says, Tanisha, we looked at before coming on air, there's the younger generation coming through are far more aware of sustainability and the environmental awareness. So actually, if they were to walk into a dealership and the sales exec immediately launches into range and money and total cost of ownership, that might put them off because actually they're there for their reason is the environment. So I think this is where, it's against the old saying, we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. But I think it's going to be really important, back to that education where we started our conversation, is around to listen really carefully. So that what you can do is you can listen and understand the requirements and the objections. So am I talking to someone who is environmentally conscious, or am I talking to Adam's dad? In terms of where are the concerns, where are the objections, then how do I, again from an education piece, how do I tweak and provide a relevant journey to that customer in order to get them through the barriers?
We know the big concerns with EV drivers, and we know from the report, but we also knew before coming in today, it's range, it's maintenance. We know that we're concerned about charging. Customers have since day one, since the first EV, that's been our concern, and we know we can do a better piece. We can put more information online, we can improve our websites to add that. But is there anyone that you look at that you think actually they're doing a great job, they're already doing an amazing job in explaining that, and that's a really good, something that someone can go away, have a little look at their website and get some inspiration?
I think from the independent space, you can look at EV experts.
Mm-hmm.
So they are only EV used, so they've built up that knowledge and that experience, and they can understand the barriers, and they overcome those barriers very well. Small independent, but they have focused on that. Now, if you look at independents that sell ICE and EV well, there are some, and there are some very good ones. But I say at the moment, it's very difficult to find very good EV used independent sales operations.
I think from my side is, so when my car was poorly and I wasn't sure whether it was going to get better, I thought I'd best start shopping just in case, and so therefore this was a two-pronged effort here. It was a genuine I might need to be shopping for my next car type piece, but also some really great sort of knowledge gathering and research into what it is. And so I'm a researcher, so I kind of sat online, kind of on my iPad, and I sort of did my research of the various brands, reached out, and of course this is can be brand specific, but also dealer group specific as well. But not to sort of sound like what everyone might say is the answer, but the Tesla experience from a consumer was actually really good. And I know it's almost it's a bit corny, because sort of Tesla have hitting the market for lots of reasons. But the reason it was good from my side is that it was just easy. So it was sat on my iPad, found the car, I want to book a test drive. I was able to book the test drive, upload my driving license. So everything was done from a paperwork perspective. They sent me a couple of short videos. As part of the booking process, I was able to say, what are the bits that I'm interested in? Range. What are the bits are you worried about? What are your objections, if you like? What are your concerns? I paraphrase. So it was around charging infrastructure. It was about range. I was able to tick a couple of little boxes. Now, what that did in the end is it delivered me some little short videos, 30, 40-second clips around the infrastructure and how to charge, and to answer some of the questions, even down to how to get in, because again, it was new to me. But Tesla, you got your little card, and you have to, in terms of an app, to be able to get in, not a key, not an old style key. So what I was able to do, and it was genuinely kind of, I wasn't driving on this day, but it genuinely was in a pub garden on a sunny afternoon on my iPhone, kind of doing some of this research with a lovely glass of ice cold wine. But it meant then that when I turned up a few days later for my test drive, I'd overcome some of my own objections because I'd had the education. I knew how to get in the car. The experience of walking was just within minutes. I was in the car and I was off, and I was experiencing it, as you say. And it was a great experience. Now, the punchline to this little story is I didn't buy an EV because my car wasn't as poorly as I thought it was. So it lived to last another day. But it was fascinating, I think, to experience from different different brands and different dealerships.
And it's the meat, isn't it? It's that transactional way. We're a little bit older, but my mum and dad, for instance, wouldn't transact the same way a lot of younger people do. They don't view the technology as good as younger people, and and when they're able to do all this sort of stuff so quickly, and especially younger, they learn so much quicker than we ever did. So for them to actually go through a sales process and some of the things that we do is probably actually a bit slow for them. The fact that they can do so much themselves and not rely on us. And the old adage, you'd have to come to a dealership 3-4 times to actually get the deal done. I think we're looking at sole number, like 1 or 2. EV is still a little bit more, as we mentioned, but I think there's so much more information available, so much they can interact with, and it literally is coming to the dealership to perform a test drive, and they're pretty much there.
But there's multiple touch points, so to speak, in terms of the digital and online space to get people into that dealership. It could be they see something on social, or they do a Google search on the website or around their local area. And we've got to be aware of them as dealerships. I think one of our biggest challenges is from a marketing perspective is, right, are we spending our marketing budget correctly? Like that. But because people are utilising so many different touch points, they could come from anywhere at some point. So, it's making sure you're getting out to them in as many ways as possible for the different types of characteristic there are customers. And one of the jobs I've got to do is, how do you do a customer journey? Well, who's the customer? Because we've got so many broad brands, it could be a high-end customer through to a low-end customer. I mean, the Dacia Spring that's out now is what, £15,000
incredible,
unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're talking about very different customers and very different ways of buying and how they're going to go, but they're all going to come via different types of means. And I'd like to think that we can touch as many of those as possible in terms of making sure that we're contacting them and making sure we're in front of them at every point that they may be at. But
and
it's
different requirements, different
absolutely.
demographics. That we look at the end product being a particular vehicle, but actually it's also the individual customer wants. I'm only talking in the Kia brand, an EV6 versus an EV9. They're very different cars, and that's going to dictate, where they're going to look for that information. And I suppose from a market, that reach you're able to cascade out to try and bring everybody in, so that the minute they put into a Google search, or it's that basket of words, or it's a Facebook post that you've put out, and the interaction.
Or a fantastic physical brochure, because again, you think not everyone. I'd love a 30 or 40-second video, and 3 or 4 of them to me was brilliant, like bite size, and everything was there. But for other people, like our parents again, is that they want to go in and sit and talk to someone for an hour, and they want to leave with a lovely physical brochure that they can sit and digest.
It's tangible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, what is my issues? Well, oh, here we go. It's all written on here, but you need to then also reflect that across everything you do, putting this into bite. So this is just a start, really, but it's going to build a bedrock of content on our website, content on our YouTube sites. What can we pull out of this that we can do more of? What gadgets are there on the car? For me, I'm much more of an EV car guy than I am as I was saying, a combustion car guy, because I love an EV because it's a gadget.
Yes.
At the end, it's just a big gadget. It's got loads of toys in it. And I'm in marketing, and I love a gadget.
I think I've seen, again, certain companies do very well with product reviews. They'll actually video themselves on a 5, 6, 7 minute drive, explaining about the car. Someone actually physically drives. It's like the Top Gear, isn't it? It's doing that, but on EV, and promoting that. They're specific to that particular company and that brand. But I think there's those sorts of things, and if you can put the links in, and as you're marketing and sending that information out, people can obviously click in and use the hyperlinks and suddenly say, actually, that looks really nice, and again, getting someone's genuine feedback.
It's doing it right as well, because a lot of what you fall into, and it's across the industry, is we end up just doing it on people's mobile phones, and they're just walking around the car. So trying to persuade people that it's better to professionalise that and bringing in a proper person to do, at least when the new cars come in, making sure that they're properly videoed, they're properly done. And to be fair to the guys, they're taking that on board. They're filming the videos now. We've done a few now, and they're making sure that that's going out to the customer. We've just done one on the Scenic actually, and the Spring. The Scenic one has a fair few thousand hits on it already in terms of the YouTube. We've only got about 8 YouTube videos on there at the moment. We're getting round to it, but it's a question of people actually seeing it. Oh, actually, it's a family car that happens to be an electric vehicle as opposed to an electric. It's another electric vehicle. So these are things you've got to get across, and you've got to do well as a dealership, and well as a thinking about your customers and what they want and where they want it, and then it's my job to disseminate that across all the platforms.
So my favourite way to always end these podcasts is a really quick fire, one by one, your one tip to a dealer that is watching right now, what can they do to improve that experience for customers? If they're only going to implement one thing and one thing only, what would you tell them to do?
Top of the funnel activity, everything is there for the customer to consume that makes their decision making easier. That's it.
So for me, it would definitely be around listening and offering a relevant customer journey. So not making assumptions and making sure you're relevant to the customer that's either sat in front of you or from Adam's perspective on your website.
I think it goes back to a little bit of the customer journey. Everything that you said, and we educate customers, but customers aren't normally going to transact that quickly. And I think we suffer a lot. We say we're going to do something, we don't always follow up. And I think lead management for us is our bloodline. And I think we just need to make sure that if a customer wants to have some time, we proactively contact the customer, not to annoy them, but just to make sure they've got every little bit of information they need to make the informed decision, and give them all the tools they need.
So I agree with everything everyone said.
You
So
had the easy seat there, didn't you?
So I know, but I will try something different. I'll try and come up with something different in sense of try and be across be aware of the different platforms that are available and the different generations of people you're talking to, where that car fits in within the market. So making sure that you're clear with your communication out to your customers and you're targeting the right audience in the right way.
Perfect.
And I know I said one, but it's just one.
I'll let you sneak another one in.
All your staff are online with that vision.
Yes.
You know, that they know, because you can do everything to get the customer in. But like we said, that used car typical example, we can burn that customer really quickly.
Culture's important, isn't it? You're operating in.
I think that was my easiest podcast. Yeah, I just got to sit back and listen, and I didn't even really need to ask any questions. So thank you. That was lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.